Welcome back to Hillbilly Pillars. I'm taking on the big dog. I'm going to be counting down my favorite ranks of Bob Dylan's studio albums. I wanted to start this whole crazy venture by kind of putting into context what the man and his music has meant to me over my lifetime. When I was 14 years old, living in Panama City, Florida, in the Panhandle, both of my older brothers went to college in a small private university called Mercer in Macon, Georgia. And at one of my brothers, the end of his freshman year, my older brother Brian, he brought home Bob Dylan's Greatest Hits Volume 1 on CD. And from that introduction and that disc, for just kid me at 14, it opened the door to a lifelong love, borderline, obsession with the man and his music. His catalog has become kind of my central reference point for life. Kind of the way I reflect on like the meaning and stuff. It almost always comes back to some verse in some Bob Dylan song. I would guesstimate I've seen him somewhere in the neighborhood of between 40 and 50 times throughout the years. The first time I was able to see Bob live was with that brother Brian and his friend Rhett in 1992 in Pensacola. Rhett ended up becoming a pretty major taper in the Bob world. But this first attempt that he tried at this 92 show was like with an actual old school tape deck. And it was really funny. The show actually started with Everything Is Broken from the Oh Mercy album. And the tape recorder that he tried to sneak in and use got about 20 seconds in and it was broken. So it's kind of like a prize piece. So we've got this 15-second horrible sounding tape of Bob Dylan doing Everything Is Broken. And then the next time I saw him was when I kind of had fully engrossed his catalog up to that point and was all the way in. And that was in 95 on a 3-show run near where I lived that started in Dothan, Alabama, of all places, and ended up in Thibodaux, Louisiana. It's a really cool full circle moment for me. Bob's going to be playing Dothan again, only the second time he's ever played the small city, and I'm going to be returning to see him there with the two people that I went with originally, back all those years ago in 1995. But I think one of the ways I can kind of a superlative I can use for like kind of how I feel about Bob's music is, I would guess currently, like my all-time favorite discography is his studio albums, and then I would say probably in the top 5 is his bootleg series, like above any other artist catalog. I guess I would have like Bob's and then Van's studio work and Van Morrison's studio work and maybe, Merle Haggard, Bruce Springsteen, Neil Young. And then I think after that, I would have Bob's bootleg series. I just think the world of him. I think he is the most essential American artist. And I really have strong feelings about the longevity of his career and what he's been able to do in the latter part of his career and how that really separates him from any of his contemporaries. You've got the whole 60s zenith and the zeitgeist that most people associate him with, and fairly enough, that was world altering. But what he's done kind of post, like since Oh Mercy and like the end of the 80s there, and then his rejuvenation that came with Time Out of Mind, which won a Grammy for Album of the Year, that's where it legitimately becomes incomparable. You have these who's better arguments with other artists and that type of thing, and that's all taste, just like my ranks. And I always emphasize favorites and not best. Even though I feel like I really know Bob's catalog, I still wouldn't want to go down the road of saying what's best or isn't. But yeah, I think his latter day career is just unprecedented. There are plenty of artists that have had one or two great albums or like a swan song album that has got notoriety, but to still be vibrant and pushing the envelope. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm about to see him again. I'm going to see him twice. I'm going to see him in Macon with my brothers, and then I'm going to see him in Dothan, and he is going to be backing Rough and Rowdy Ways. His most recent studio album, and you just don't see artists of his veneration completely out there backing their latest work. It's not done, and that's just Bob for you. So, as most people are with Bob Dylan fans and hearing them go on about how much they think I'm probably ready for that to end. So I will start getting down to my countdown. One of the things I noticed was that, on the back end, while this is a favorites list, and I think there's going to be some like, dude, you're crazies in there. The back end of my list, I think, is pretty chalk with what you see with most lists. Bob's not great stuff is Bob's not great stuff, I think, pretty universally. So, if I remember right, we're counting down 39. Yep, this is 39. I'm not counting the recent, what's the one? Oh, shoot. I'm forgetting the most recent thing he did of like covers of his older songs. I'm forgetting that, but I'm not including that one because it's a covers of his own work that's previously been on albums. So I'm not counting that. I want to say Shadows in the Night, but I know that's not it. But anyway, let's get to it. At 39, I have 1988's Down in the Groove. I particularly get annoyed by the 1,500 bad clips you can see of virtually unknown comedians riffing their jokes about Bob Dylan and impersonating his over-the-top Bob Dylan voice. And unfortunately, the kind of mockery that they're doing usually I associate with Down in the Groove. It is when it became and when it reflects that most of the Dylan-y stuff that you'll see. It's a hodgepodge over, I think it was like 5 to 6 years of recordings put together. I think I remember reading there was not one joint session for any single song. So none of them were like recorded in the same session on the same day. Yeah, it's just not good. You've got Death Is Not the End on side one, which Nick Cave ended up doing a cover of. That's really good. And then actually on the backside, there's a song called Silvio, and that was one that he co-wrote with Robert Hunter, the Grateful Dead. And that track actually features in the greatest show I've ever seen, which was on that 1995 run in Biloxi, Mississippi. Bob Dylan's backing band was the band you would see him on for the Woodstock performance from that time, the Woodstock Revisited, and then the Unplugged. That band was out for blood, and Bob was uncharacteristically like gunning for the audience. It was really rocking shows. That band was unreal and great and dynamic, and it's still to this day, that show is the best show I've ever seen. And in that show, he performed Silvio, and it was one of the highlights. So even on what I have ranked as Bob Dylan's dead last studio album, there's a track on here that was featured in the best show I've ever seen. So that ought to kind of clue you in where I'm at with Bob. But yeah, at 39, I've got it way down in the groove. Down in the groove. All right. 38. The half eponymous, because it doesn't have his first name, Dylan. Bob Dylan. This is 1973. a pieced together album of covers, kind of using the infamous Nashville Skyline voice. There's just not a lot here that keeps me. It's not an album I return to, which there's only a handful of those, and you're going to see them right here at the back end of this. You got a cover of Big Yellow Taxi and Mr. Bojangles, The Ballad of Ira Hayes, and it's not very good. And I want to go back to the previous one. For each album, I want to highlight one song that's my favorite. For 39, for Down in the Groove, I would do Silvio, as mentioned. And then on this one, it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of an upbeat song that I do like to put on and jam out to, and that's Sarah Jane off this. Yeah, kind of a peculiar cover, and kind of a peculiar hodgepodge. And that is Dylan. All right. Number 37. Back to Bob in the 80s. The 80s were pretty rough on Bob. Once again, I'm going to be reflective of quite a few of the lists you're going to see. And that is Knocked Out Loaded. Knocked Out Loaded. I'm not sure. I can't remember when this came out. I want to say maybe 86. But don't quote me on that. I get pretty bad lost in the 80s stuff. The other stuff I know for sure. Let me see if I can. Yep, 1986. I think I'm with most folks. This album is pretty much a throwaway, except for one track, and that one track is an all-timer. It was the all-timer Bob track, Brownsville Girl. It's kind of like Silvio being in my favorite show of all time. My wife and I have been blessed with the fortune to have adopted a son, and she let me get away with naming him Henry Porter, which is a direct reference from the long epic Brownsville Girl. So, yeah, you got other songs on here, cover Precious Memories and Drifting Too Far From Shore. I would think that if it wasn't for Brownsville Girl, this would probably be dead last. I think I remember curiously looking for what is the least streamed studio album track by Bob Dylan? It was like you could look at that on Spotify. And from what I remember, Drifting Too Far From Shore off Knocked Out Loaded was the least streamed Bob Dylan song. So yeah, there's that. So I got one more at 36 because I want to even it out and start the next one at 35. And I would already say, I'm not a big Tears guy, but I would jump up a tier now, actually. And this is 2009's Christmas in the Heart, Bob Dylan's Christmas album. He put this out, and a lot of people, including myself, were kind of in disbelief, like, Bob Dylan's doing a Christmas album. But in kind of the venerated old school style that Bob likes to talk about and reference a lot, and kind of the projects he does, like his book that he wrote about songs, and then his radio theme time radio hour. A lot of old school artists would do Christmas albums because you could make money. You just cover the same old tracks and make yourself some good money doing a Christmas album. So I think he sees himself in that lineage. So in that way, it makes sense. And I like it. I am a fan of the album. I just have it this low because Christmas time's the only time I return to it. I don't find myself in the middle of the year being like, man, I want to pull Christmas in the Heart and listen to it. My favorite track on it is Must Be Santa. And this is another thing I forgot to mention on where I'm at Bob Dylan wise in my life. The first time that I wouldn't say met, saw my wife was at a Bob Dylan cover night. She fronted a band here called the Sarah Mac Band. And for a long time, for like 15, 16 years, she was the front and the main songwriter. And I saw her at a Bob Dylan cover night. And what was funny is that later I would go see her, and they would do holiday shows every year because you could make money doing that. And one of the things they always did was this version, It Must Be Santa, this kind of polka version. And so yeah, I'd heard her do it before I heard Bob Dylan's version on this. But my favorite track on Christmas in the Heart is Must Be Santa. So there we have it. We have started at the bottom and are working our way up on my rundown of my Bob Dylan studio albums favorite list. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next chapter.